the odor is not on the outside. So if, let's say, your dog's nose comes in contact with it, you get some dirt on it, you touch it with your bare hand, you can clean it off. But the best thing you could do is keep them in the bags. Please do not put them in the freezer. We've had a guy who stored his in the freezer, and he said, my dog can't find it. I said, well, no kidding. You froze it. There is no odor there.
Is there a heat issue or any? I mean, when we are still, how do you want guys? So I know in the metal bag, but where heat wise, what's the best storage for that?
Welcome to Police Canine Radio. I'm Gregg Tawney. With me, Rich Hartman. Rich, what's going on?
You get a little breather time. You just finished with your basic class. It's over, and you got some guys and gals out on the street doing the Lord's work.
Yep, we do. They're out there on their own right now.
How'd that go?
Could be patrolling right now. Really good class, really good handlers. You know what's funny is today we were just remarking how our handler class at week 5, their obedience I would put up against our maintenance class, our maintenance group. As a matter of fact, our handler class is putting our maintenance group to shame, which says, guess what our maintenance guys aren't doing?
Obedience.
They're not practicing obedience. And we were talking, we're like, shit, if we had a competition right now, our basic class is going to they're going to kick the ass of our maintenance class. So we were kind of putting the gauntlet down to maintenance that they need to step up their game.
Who's the trainer in charge of that maintenance group?
I wish I knew. He needs to be fired, terminated.
Hey, before we get started on this, we had an interesting question that came up to us this week. There's a handler somewhere in the United States that was given a 45-pound Malinois, and that handler reached out to us and said, hey, what do you think about this? And it was kind of I guess our long-winded answer to the short question was, it can probably work if the dog's super tenacious. I don't think it's necessary. We talk about this, and I know it's a silly cliche answer, but it's not the size of the dog, it's the size of the fight in the dog, right? Like and that really applies to this. I think when you're in the 40-pound range, you're definitely battling some size issues if somebody really wanted to lay the boots to the dog. But what I've seen most often with really small dogs is they're incredibly tenacious. Like they know they're small dogs and they fight harder because of it. And certainly having a 100-pound dog doesn't necessarily solve your problem with aggression either. We've seen plenty of soft 100-pound dogs. So sure. I guess our answer to him was, if your dog can get after it and really likes to do the work, and when you try and fend them off with some aggression and some pressure and the dog responds to it, then your 45-pound dog can work.
Yeah, and this is going to go back to experiences as well. You know, I think back, I mean, I worked a 62-pounder. Rich, I think you had something similar.
High 50s, yeah.
We've had dogs that are high 50s within our group, and they're just like you're talking about, and we'll keep using the word because I think it spells it out best. They're just tenacious as hell, and that goes a long way. But if it's kind of a lower medium drive and it's smaller like that, I'm going to probably
pass on that.
I'm going to probably pass on that dog. And there's pros and cons to big, and there's pros and cons to small, but regardless, and I think we talked about in the last podcast, a lot of our contacts are in close proximity, and you guys are a team. And I think if the dog goes in and acts like that furry flashbang and puts things in your favor as far as the confrontation, I think you just have to know that, though. There is a possibility if you get that right 1%er and a small dog goes on there, I mean, potential that dog could be defeated. But I think that's a pretty small percentage of deployments. I think the vast majority of deployments, you know, we talk about it all the time. The dog is a psychological factor. You know, it's not that much. I've been bit several times, unfortunately. And if you play with dogs that bite long enough, so will you. And if you're a handler, there's 2 types of handlers. I heard this the other day. I'm going to use it as my own.
Let's do it.
There's 2 types of handlers. There's those that have been bit and those that'll be bit again. And so from having been bit by several dogs, at the time you get bit, it just feels like pressure. Right? It's not like it's super painful. And if you were in that mindset of I'm fighting through this, or you've got some mind-altering drugs and you're not feeling pain, you're going to work through that whether the dog is 45 pounds or 55 pounds. I don't know if it makes that big a difference at that point. But so it's something that you have to be ready for anyway. And I don't care how big your dog is.
And the one thing I did when we reached out to the handler, I said, hey, like mouth size, muzzle size might be a big player in this. So if you have a really small dog.
Sure. How much does a pit bull weigh?
Yeah, a lot of them are 50-pound dogs.
I won't be bit by that son of a gun.
No, and we deal with healers all the times in the pet world. Like healers are nasty, and they're always biting, and they have me on my toes, and I don't like getting bit by them, and I'm always a little nervous when we get
Got your wiffle ball bat out there?
I do use the wiffle ball bat
good.
regularly. Absolutely. So moving off of things that bite and moving into the real reason that we all use dogs is for their exceptional nose.
That's what we tell everybody.
That is the line.
So
right?
we better back that up.
We're going to move into detection dog work, and we're specifically going to today we're going to talk to Todd Wilbur with Precision Explosives. Welcome, Todd. We appreciate you coming on. And we want to give you a chance to give a rundown of what got you into the situation where you are developing and selling in what we call soaks, but I know there's a better terminology for that. So if you want to introduce yourself and tell us how you got here, we'd appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you and talk a little bit about this emerging technology. I'm a military trained bomb technician. I graduated from EOD school in 1991. Later, I was selected to be a member of the United States Army Delta Force as a bomb technician. And after military service, then I went on to work at two of the national laboratories, Los Alamos National Lab and Lawrence Livermore National Lab. And I primarily worked in nuclear counterterrorism, but I got a chance to spend a lot of time with some brilliant scientists and engineers and really get a much better understanding of how explosives work. And I got a chance to do some original research there. Later, I went to work for the Department of Energy and again worked in nuclear counterterrorism. Then went on to do scummy contract work for the State Department. The reason I left the Department of Energy is my wife at the time was about to become my boss, both at home and at work. The government frowns on that. So off to doing scummy contract work I went. And that led me to Afghanistan, where I had probably the most life-changing experiences of my life. I got a chance to work and live with Afghan foreign nationals. I was the only Westerner in my house. We lived in a safe house out in Jalalabad City. I didn't live on a fob or a cop or any type of base. We just did our thing. We got called by the locals and worked on literally hundreds of IEDs. All but two, we cut wires. So there was no cool robot, no cool bomb suit, no cool electronics. We just responded to calls, cut wires, and took care of explosives. That helped me understand better than any course I could have gone through what I could anticipate, and taught me more about homemade explosives than ever before. I took that experience and then went to New Mexico Tech, and I'm actually an adjunct professor at New Mexico Tech now. I was afforded the opportunity to have some grad students work with me, and we did some characterizations on some homemade explosives, specifically TATP and HMTD, which I know are very a high priority right now. And then later on, some dog people said, hey, can you come talk to us about bombs and explosives and what they look like? Because our guys can detect explosive odors, but they don't know what explosives look like. They don't know what bombs look like. And then later they asked, can you sell explosives? Okay. And so we did that. Then somebody asked, can you make a training aid that doesn't require ATF licensing? So we did that. So basically anything that the canine community has asked for, we've tried to come up with a solution. We've branched out into narcotics and cadaver and bed bugs. And if you have something you're looking for, we'll try to build a training aid for you.
And I think that's the thing that, and I know Gregg's already using your products with his training, and we've had the Psy Canine gals on before, and they've talked to us about some of the stuff they're developing as a vendor and somebody who raises young dogs, and we don't know what path they're going to go down once we sell them for detection. We've used the Get Zent tubes with Nota so that we could get a dog to work on odor without having to implement an actual odor into them that might cause them to have a problem later on when they're deployable. So the Get Zent tube, I think, is probably something that's pretty important to this whole process with you. Or is that what you're using for your odor collection, essentially? And correct me when I'm using the wrong terms and use the right terms, as we do this.
So we use Get Set Material. We have a special relationship with that company. We do analysis. We do. We're always trying to improve the product line, and the material is kind of mysterious, and I think it bears a little bit of explanation as to how exactly this stuff works, why it works, and what exactly do you do with it. Is that something you guys would like to talk about?
Yeah, I think it's necessary because I think it's kind of part and parcel to this whole thing. Like, how do we have this thing hold in this odor reliably, not absorb a bunch of other odors, not gas it off so quick that we're not able to use it after a week's time? We've all used Wattman paper, cotton balls, all those things. My assumption and understanding is the Get Zent tube is a much more scientific way to hold odor for a longer period of time and be more reliable. But if you can explain to us how it works and why.
And for you handlers out there, I mean, you've already mentioned TATP and HMTD, and then we've got fentanyl, and we have certain things that we're not going to carry around in our cars, right? So we want to train our dogs on these substances, and we want to do it safely. And so, Todd, can you tell us why the things that you have there with the tubes and stuff like that, why is this going to be good for the handler? And like, if we have to go to court and that type of thing, like, what's going to happen? Because what happens is everything gets put into this category of like, well, shit's either real or it's fake, and we're only training on real. And so, and that was like the mentality, especially 20 years ago, and there was a big debate, and everybody's like, just stick with real, quote unquote. And so it's kind of like developed over the years. So if you could tell us, like, is this real or is this fake, and where does it fall?
That's a great question. So there are materials that will absorb odor, and there are materials that will allow odor to adhere to the surface. So what has happened in the past is people have used things like cotton balls, Q-tips, Wattman paper, and so forth to get what the term of art is soak. But really what you're doing is getting particles to adhere to the surface of those materials. And that's the reason why you have a limited life on materials that, while you're calling it a soak, actually what you're doing is getting particles to stick to that surface. We call it adsorption, AD, as opposed to absorption, which is soaking that material inside the actual substrate. So what does that mean? Dr. Paula Tiedemann, she's a phenomenal scientist, and if you ever want to do a deep dive on some good scholarly articles, she and Nathan Hall have done some great work. And she has her own way of, she has a specific type of cotton that she likes, a specific way that she likes to prepare it. And she thinks that it does probably the best at short-term adhesion of those odors. So in other words, it does a great job of keeping a clean odor. However, you're only going to get minutes, tens of minutes, hours of use. And it's because the particles are just simply sticking to the outside and then they go away. What's different about polymer odor capture release materials is that while you're doing this long-term soak process, you may call it an infusion or impregnation, an absorption process. What you're doing is first you're getting adhesion. In other words, those odor particles are sticking to the outside of the material. But as you allow that material to continue to, we'll just say, cook, as you allow it to cook, those odor molecules are being absorbed inside the actual rubber-like material in the Get Set tubes. So it isn't on the outside. In other words, you can't wipe it off. It is actually embedded inside the material. And that's the reason why you get such longevity out of it, is because it's actually embedded in the material itself.
One of the big questions that we get and that we have ourselves is, how long does that absorption last? What is the length of time that the Get Zent property can hold the odor before it's no longer there anymore?
Great question. A lot of that depends on a few different factors. First of which is how long you expose the get set material to the target odor. One of the most important things you can do is make sure that that exposure to your target odor is in the most sterile environment that you can create. So if you're doing this on your own, if you use a brand new small jar, when I say brand new, it shouldn't have anything there that you have to wash out. And if you have to wash it out, you just add a new odor with the washing process. So use a brand new jar, isolate your target odor in a smaller vial, and then place your get set material inside that jar. The reason why we want to isolate the target odor from the get set material is we don't want it to come in contact with the material. If you're doing something like fentanyl or TATP or something that you don't want those particles to be exposed to the dog or the handler, it is important to isolate that target odor. Let them sit in that jar. We usually let our material sit for 7 days, and we think that that gives us a pretty good infusion or impregnation of that odor in the material. If we could go longer, we would. We would absolutely jam as much odor in there as possible, and we're actually working on a new technique to do that. But 7 days seems to work pretty well, and we've calculated that you get about 155 hours of use.
How do you determine that?
So
How do you determine the hours of use? Is there a way to test the tube that gets sent product and show when it's empty?
I wish there were. In fact, somebody asked one time, is there a way that you can cause the tube to change colors so that we know that A, it's been fully soaked, and B, we know when it's fully exhausted? I wish we could do that. We don't know how to do that just yet. But what we do know is that the tubes have been tested by third parties, and we've seen what the general lifespan is of the tubes at different amounts of impregnation time or soak time. So you get a certain amount of usable life in after 30 minutes. You get a much longer shelf or much longer usable life after an hour, 12 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, and so forth, out to 7 days. So the longer that you allow for that impregnation time, the longer you get to use the material.
So can you share with us all of the different odors that you are currently offering? And can you, within a reasonable amount of time, explain to us where those odors are coming from? For example, if you're selling a precision explosive odor of fentanyl, where's the fentanyl coming from? Is the fentanyl tested? And then how are you kind of proving that is if I go to court and I have to testify that my dog was imprinted and we train regularly on precision explosive fentanyl or meth or TATP or whatever it is, how do I prove to the judge and the jury that that's a reasonable training aid?
So let me just touch on explosives for a second, and then we'll do a deep dive into the narcotics.
Okay.
For the explosives, if you're getting manufactured explosives, for example, all of the RDX in the United States comes from Kingsport, Tennessee. 100% of it all comes from the same place. PETN can come from a handful of places, but the bottom line is there are a handful of sources. The level of contamination is going to depend on how it was handled from the time it was manufactured until the time it gets to you. So we don't have a lot of control over that. We're looking at ways to keep it as pure as possible, and then do some analysis and show exactly what the contamination is or what the purity is of each one of the explosives. On the narcotics side, we've got a little bit of help in that what we use is not pharmacy grade, it's called certified reference material. What that means is that this material is what's used to calibrate the instruments that when you send your dope in to get tested at the lab, this is the material that they use to calibrate that instrument so that it knows this is what pure fentanyl looks like. So on the outside package of all of our narcotics, except for marijuana, you'll get a QR code, and it takes you to the certificate of analysis from the laboratory that synthesized that narcotic, that controlled substance, and it'll show you exactly how pure it is. So, for example, our fentanyl is 99.907% pure. And so what we've done is capture the odor of 99.907% pure fentanyl, and then on down the line with meth, heroin, cocaine, Suboxone, MDMA. We even have nicotine, and we're about to get pure THC.
Okay, and for our listeners, like just to show you how reliable it is as far as the odor composition, we have some organizations. The one in California, it used to be CNCA, now they're IPCA. They actually use your product for fentanyl for the actual certifications. Again, because we don't want handlers running around with fentanyl. It's a great, safe way to do it. Do you know of any other organizations? Is this a trend that you're seeing now in the U.S. where now we're using your product for that? I mean, I think it really talks to how reliable it is. Yeah.
I think there are 2 or 3 other organizations, certifying associations, that also will only allow our fentanyl to be used for imprinting, training, and certification. And it's absolutely accurate as far as what the odor is. Florida International University, Dr. Lauren DeGrief has tested powder fentanyl and then tested the odor that comes off of our training aid, and they're identical. They're different strengths, but they are identical.
Can we talk a little bit, and we don't need to name names. I don't even know if it's even valuable to do that. It doesn't matter. But can we talk about the progression and the differences between what you're offering as a training aid and what we know as a pseudo versus actual, and we'll go on the drug side because I know we're not going to pull a bunch of explosives out of evidence, but some drugs that have been pulled out of evidence that handlers are keeping in their car, and kind of where precision falls into that area.
So I think that if you look at the last 20 years of training aid development, the very first steps in doing pseudos, I think that was a tremendous effort to fill a gap that existed. There was certainly a need, and I think that the people that worked on that deserve some credit for addressing that and doing the best they could to fulfill that need. Technology continues to progress, and as it does, then we can continue to improve. Even within our own product line, we're still continuing to find things that we learn about from third-party analysis, and then we address those issues. So I think from dealing with real to mimics or pseudos, then we have gone on to do what is called in the explosive side. We went on to non-detonables. Some of the non-detonables had things you had to proof off of, but now we've moved on to other materials called polymer odor capture release materials. Get sent, and another material called PDMS. I'm not going to bore you with what that acronym stands for, but basically it captures the smell of things, it captures the particles in the air, and then allows it to be used for analysis. In some cases, you could use it as a training aid, but it has tremendous background odor associated with it. So the new materials, like what the guys at Getsin have developed, are phenomenal from the standpoint that if you look at some of the scholarly articles, Allison Simon produced one a few years ago where they tested Getsin material and looked at the background. It has about the same background as an unused quart paint can. It just does not have, everything has odor, but it has a minimal amount of background odor of its own. But these materials are now able to capture various different odors. And this is very unique in that other methods have required you to kind of match the odor in terms of its molecular configuration, whether it's positive or negatively charged and other attributes. That had to be matched with material that was going to capture it. The Getsin material is very unique in that it doesn't seem to have those limitations.
I think that's So, and this is important for the handlers, and I want them to kind of understand how to manage this product. So, handler has has a precision kit of odors that they're using for their dog to be able to testify in court as to how well that odor is holding up. Should they be logging the hours of usage, the hours that it's out of the containment, method, whether it's a TAD or whatever it's being kept in, to determine how long that odor is lasting? And then should there be a time during their handling and management of the precision product that they should replace that with a new batch? How does that work for the handler?
So I think that recording the actual exposure time, the time outside the package, is probably a good idea. But quite honestly, your dog will tell you when it's exhausted all of its odor. You'll see that your dog struggles more and more to be able to find it. And if you then start to look at, well, I've had this thing for 9 months, maybe it's time, and I've used it a lot. Now is probably a good time to get new stuff. Okay. But the best thing you can do is put these things back in the metallized mylar bags that they come in. Minimize exposure time. Please don't touch it with your bare hand. And like we talked about before, that the odor is not on the outside. So if, let's say, your dog's nose comes in contact with it, you get some dirt on it, you touch it with your bare hand, you can clean it off. Use some water, you can wipe it off, let it dry, put it back in the bag. But the best thing you could do is keep them in the bags. Please do not put them in the freezer. We've had a guy who stored his in the freezer, and he said, my dog can't find it. I said, well, no kidding. You froze it. There is no odor there.
And so is there a heat issue or any? I mean, when we are how do you want guys? So I know in the metal bag, but where heat wise, what's the best storage for that? Unfortunately,
they driving around with it in their trunk.
I was going to say, unfortunately, handlers inevitably just throw it in the back of their car, and obviously that's probably not best.
Yeah, that's fine. Actually, we have a customer in the Middle East who exposes it to very high heat, and they have no problems with it.
Oh, good.
Getting very cold, just know that you're going to limit the amount of available odor just because you've frozen the material.
Okay,
so and that would be true of just about any controlled substance.
Yeah, it doesn't I use the right terms. It doesn't gas off with the higher temperatures where it kind of deteriorates quickly because of that. So that's not a concern.
If you left it out for days in the high heat, yeah, that's going to be a problem. But if you put it back in the bags, one of the things that's important about the bags is that you're minimizing the amount of volume around the material. And this is true of all your odors, even if you have pound quantities, or with controlled substances, we were talking about 20-gram quantities. Minimize the amount of airspace around whatever you're going to use to contain it. And the reason why we stress that is that's where the odor goes. So if you left it out in the open, let's say it's a block of dry ice, it's eventually going to all go away. But if you keep it in an enclosed container, at some point it's going to reach equilibrium. In other words, the amount of pressure that thing is putting out to try to off gas, it's going to reach equilibrium. It can't off gas anymore. So those metallized mylar bags don't allow the odor to penetrate through, and it minimizes the volume, so it helps keep your odors fresher longer.
Do you have a Nota type product? Does Precision have a Nota type product that's easier to get?
We are close partners with the Sci K9 gals, and so we kind of do you want to do this or do you want to do it? And they've opted to they've wanted to do that if there's an issue where they have a difficulty in supplying that, then we may help them if that's what they want, but we don't want to do anything that's competitive to what they're doing, if that makes sense. And so if there's an issue, please bring it up. But other than that, we're not going to try to compete with them.
Yeah, I think our issue is ease of trying to get it. And I've talked to Michelle about this. I think having that product available more readily, and I think there's conversations being had with Ray Allen and whatnot where that might be more readily available. She's really great with us. We can reach out to her and get it when we want it. So no complaints. Just I'm thinking more commercially available Nota, because it is really valuable. I know a lot of trainers and vendors don't really know what it is yet, but it's really useful to have that novel odor training aid to work with before we know which way the dogs are going as far as, what path they're going to take in detection.
That's something we'd definitely consider doing. But again, it would be something we would coordinate with Michelle.
Yeah. Hey, quick question. So I'm a handler out there, and I'm like, I'm trying to sell my agency on maybe let's get some of these tubes, and they're going to be like, well, what happens if we go to court? Like, is precision? Number one, have you been called in court to have to testify to the components of the tubes? And number two, like, would you be willing to come into court to start getting the record straight? How would that work? Because if you're going to leave it up to me or Rich or a handler to explain the things that you're explaining on this podcast, like, it ain't going to go over.
Well, the good thing now is we can just bring the podcast in.
I just say, listen to him. Yeah.
So we're more than happy to come testify. We have not been asked to do that. However, let's just say kind of preemptively, I've talked with a number of prosecutors who want to make sure they fully understand exactly what we're doing, how it works, and the certificate of analysis that comes with it, and how they can help them. But like I said, we're willing to help explain or testify. But I think that piece of paper that says this is what it comes from really helps, and we could back that up with further analysis.
Okay.
I think that's as I'm listening to this, I know in the past, and I won't talk about today specifically, but in the past we've had handlers that were carrying, and we'll talk about dope because obviously this doesn't really apply to explosives, but they're the dope that they've had in their cars, and some of them for years, and some of them in all kinds of temperature variants. We've seen some training aids that don't even resemble what they're supposed to be. They've gotten wet.
So one of the things.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
One of the things to keep in mind about street dope, and people argue, well, they're going to have masking and cutting agents and so on and so forth. We're really focused on the psychoactive. So the common denominator amongst all those things, masking and cutting agents, and residual acid. So for example, people talk about, well, when I smell your heroin training aids, I don't smell the vinegary smell that I normally smell with street drugs. That's because oftentimes with street drugs, that chemist may not have crashed the reaction. In other words, there's residual acid. The reaction is still running. And that's why you end up with things that look brown where they should be crystalline white. That's the reason why sometimes you get that vinegary smell when there should be no smell at all. So you don't know what state that synthesis is in, whether or not they've actually completed the synthesis. It could be ongoing. You could be making more heroin while it sits there. Plus the other things like masking, cutting, binding, acid reduction agents that they're using, all those things are going to add to the scent picture. And in some cases, I've seen reports where, for example, fentanyl tablets have come across the border, and they're only 16% fentanyl. So the remaining is all things that could have much more odor than what fentanyl has. So it's important for the dog, in my opinion, to be able to drill down to the psychoactive, which is the part that's either going to put somebody in jail or not.
Yeah, and to be able to generalize that across the board, this part of the ingredient, no matter what it's cut with, is the important part. The other stuff doesn't matter to the dog.
Exactly.
Yeah, and handlers out there, if you're running a dope dog, you need to understand one of the areas they're going to attack you on is what's the substance you've been training with, and what did you imprint? We'll use the term imprint for sake of discussion. What did you imprint on? And if you don't have like the computer readout of exactly everything that was in there, they're going to attack you on that. And so this sounds like it's a great way to go, well, here it is. Here's the certificate. This is exactly what we've been training with our dog. And then you're going to go ahead and defeat the defense on that one.
Yeah, Todd, last question. So you guys are doing explosives, you guys are doing drugs. What else are you doing? Anything like bed bugs or, computer parts? Or
Rich has got a bed bug issue. So
I do. I like
specific
it.
to him.
And I don't want to bring any more into the house, so I'm going to see if you have a product that I can use. No, what other stuff are you imprinting on the Gits?
We do have bed bugs. We just bought termites yesterday. We do currency. We're about to do euros.
Oh.
We have U.S. currency. We're about to do euros in currency.
Interesting.
We do have electronics. So what we use is a circuit board that has actually had electricity run through it, and that smells different from one that has not had electricity run through it. And then we add tantalum powder, which is let's call it the guts to a lot of solid state components. And that works pretty well. We also have bad lithium battery smells. So lithium batteries that are good don't actually have any odor associated with them because it's essentially a sealed metal can. But if it goes bad, then it does give off a very distinct odor. So we have that.
What's the application for that one, Todd? What, the bad lithium batteries? Where does that come
blowing up
play?
airplanes?
Cargo.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big deal. When you go check in someplace at an airport, they're going to ask you, do you have any lithium batteries with you? If those lithium batteries go bad, then they can start a pretty serious fire. We would love to see dogs capable of doing cargo screening, especially not necessarily for commercial flights, but for cargo shipping, because you don't know what somebody is secreted in there. You could have a big box of lithium batteries, and somebody just doesn't want to go through the paperwork to say, hey, yeah, I've got a 20 by 20 by 20 box of lithium batteries, and the next thing you know, you burn down an airplane.
Yeah.
So we think that would be a good application. We're actually asked to come up with that odor, and we have body parts. So we have a couple of different cadaver odors. One is a shoulder, and the other is a sternum. We even have the demographics of the donors. We're looking to expand that, but cadavers are kind of an interesting area. There are a lot of variables, and I think there needs to be some more research done before we can kind of drill down into exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think we were talking to the Psy Canine gals about that, and like the point of decomposition, like freshly dead versus been dead for a while. Apparently, smell. I mean, we know this from going to dead bodies in police work, but apparently the science of a day-old dead and a month-old dead is a lot different. Is that right?
Absolutely. Versus, buried dead, on the ground dead, underwater dead, all those things change. Robert Gubrell does a great job of explaining that stuff. Dr. Lauren DeGrief has done some studies as well. I encourage people to look at her papers and look up in Google Scholar and look up Dr. Lauren DeGrief, and she's done some great work to include stuff on cadavers.
If we want to pick up some of your stuff, if we want to pick up precision explosive products, where can we get them? Can you point us in the right direction to make sure that guys can get out there and buy your stuff?
Sure, you can find us at pre-exp.com, and you go to shop and you can find all of our various products. We even have a little bit of merch. We've got a T-shirt that says "Just Hit or Bang," which we love, double entendres. We're going to be expanding our product line into a new product. If anybody remembers the mixed odor delivery device, we are now making, let's just call it version 2.0, that uses Todds. So now you're going to be able to take masking and cutting agents and then add it to the smell of your controlled substance and then see how your dog does. Do the same thing with explosives, arson, all kinds of things like that.
On that TAD discussion really quick, because I'm going to throw myself under the bus. We took some Get Zemp tubes that are impregnated and we store them in the TAD. Am I better off? It's a small TAD. Am I better off keeping it in the Mylar bag or the metal bag, or is it okay storing it in the sealed TAD?
I would put the TAD with the tube inside of a metallized Mylar bag.
Okay.
And the reason for that is the seals are good on TADs, but metallized Mylar bags are better.
Okay.
Also, the more you open up a TAD and take things out, put things in, the more you degrade the seals. And that's true of any jar, of any container like that. But you just want to make sure that those seals stay intact.
Got it.
And anybody who uses Todds, please do not punch holes in the paper that makes the tad a tad.
Yeah, that's a thing, huh?
This thing I can't.
The white paper.
I can't get it to soak up any air. I'm gonna punch holes in it. That'll solve it.
Yes, I know. It's kind of funny, but we've actually had people call us up and say, "Hey,
Sure.
my guys took the paper out, and what is this thing supposed to do?" Or my guys punched holes in the paper, and is that how it works?
No.
Well, not really.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. We really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
I think for us, it was the big thing. We're already using the product out here. I use Get Zent all the time. I love the tubes. I love being able to impregnate them with different things. Gregg's in his training group, he's already using the precision stuff that you guys have going on out there. Obviously, the state of California, with CNCA. What's the new
IPCA?
IPCA has already bought into it. The funny thing is I just talked to a detection handler very close to you who had no idea what precision was, what Get Zent was, and I had to explain it to actually a Virginia handler. I had to explain it to him, and he's completely on board. So I did a little sales pitch for you in your own backyard. But I think the more we can get this information, the more we can get this information. And he was thrilled because he was like, "Oh man, I've been trying to find." He's an explosive dog handler, and he's been trying to find ways to get a reliable training aid, and was having some difficulty with that. So hopefully, getting the word out there helps.
So if anybody has any questions, I have my phone with me, probably too much. But if you send us a message on Facebook or Instagram or through our website, or we're on all kinds of different media platforms, if I'm awake, I'll usually answer you as fast as I can. You're talking to me or to Chrissy, and we've been doing this for, and we'll do everything we can to try to help you. If we can't figure out the answer, then we'll find somebody who can.
I really appreciate it, Todd. Thank you for coming
Todd.
on. We appreciate your experience and knowledge, and we appreciate this product. So thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
And in the meantime,
Train hard
and be safe.